Radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech of the heart.
Hello and welcome to It's Your Voice, the show that hosts enriching conversations in diversity. My name is Bahia Yaksan. I'm a core alignment coach, an emotional wisdom training specialist, and a diversity educator. And you can find descriptions of courses I offer to help people recognize patterns of bias that are not helpful to them or others, and to learn how to create patterns that do cultivate belonging and community, which makes everyone happy. They're on my website, and that is called knowwhatyouvantcoaching.wordpress.com if you're interested. Our show tonight is called Climate, Students, and the Holidays. But before I introduce our guests and before we dive into those topics, I wanted to just acknowledge that tomorrow is National Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day. And I highly recommend a podcast we did 2 years ago with a child survivor, Peggy Unger. She's a phenomenal woman, and that particular episode is called Eyewitness Child Survivor Never Forgets the Attack on Pearl Harbor. And you can download it from your favorite podcast platform. And I also want to bring out our guests and thank them and all teachers now, just thinking about the stresses we live in periodically, and in some places always, depending on where you live in the world. I just want to acknowledge and thank all teachers for everything you do to focus on helping shape the lives of and the hearts and minds and of young people who are dealing with lots and lots of stresses and are impacted by really huge challenges that are happening all over the world. So I will start by naming Liz Shoemaker. Liz, thank you so much for being here. I want to just say a couple sentences that Liz has been teaching biology and middle school science since 2012 and chairs the board of directors for Camp Omni, which is a summer camp for children focused on critical thinking and youth development. In her free time, she enjoys crafting, nail art, and spending time outdoors. Our other amazing science teacher is Hannah Zarnick-Ryan, who's 8th grade science teacher, and with the background in the field of biology and environmental chemical testing. Thank you both so much for being here. And is there anything either one of you want to add to your introductions? I know there's so much more we could say about each of you. Liz, we'll start with you. Is there any more information you'd like the listeners to know?
I think you covered it pretty well, my background and my passions. Yeah.
Okay. How about you, Hannah?
Hello. Thank you for having. I also I taught 1 year of high school biology, and then my student teaching was in high school bio also. So this is my first year, 8th grade science teaching.
Well, I also think it might be interesting for the listeners and viewers to know that you teach in 2 different middle schools, but you're on the same campus side by side.
Across the hall from each other. We'll chat between classes as we're holding the door open for our students.
Show our nail updates, nail polish. Yeah.
Yeah. And just to brag more about that, is that how much would you both agree that it's a fair statement to say your schools operate on slightly different paradigms? That might sound like, and that's not always easy. That takes a lot of adult administrative and colleague communication and relationship building and understanding and support. And I really commend both of your schools because my children have been through the systems, and I have so many nieces and nephews who went through Liz's school, and my kids went through Hannah's school. So I just
It's
want people to.
it's tricky because it's not something that there's another school we can go out to and see how they do it, because there's no setup like ours. So it's been a continuous progress and development and change through the years that I've been working at Emerson. We've been sharing a campus with Da Vinci for as long as longer than I've taught there. So it's been really cool to see how it's grown and blossomed, and the resources that are available with kind of the two different philosophies around teaching and learning, but both centered around the same goals of doing what's best for kids. So we have that common ground.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Liz can probably speak more to it than I can. But I remember being impressed, I guess, with how collaborative, or at least involved, the students on it's the same campus, but the students at the two different schools are with each other. I remember thinking that was really unique, even though they're technically separate schools. They're all still friends with each other. Like, I get Emerson students in my classroom in passing period, and I see mine across the way and Liz's. So it's awesome.
Yeah, and I understand that you two model that because they probably see you two talking.
And
I mean,
going
and
into each
sharing.
other's classrooms and just
Yeah.
showing up and sending people to go, hey, you should go watch this teacher because she will teach differently than me, but we're on the same page about a lot of things. And it's so when we have interns or from UC Davis, in the people who are considering becoming teachers, they'll come and watch and experience a secondary classroom to decide if it's actually something they might be interested in. And I'll send them to all over the wing and the campus for other people I think they should go watch. It's really valuable. And actually, in the next few weeks, we're being given opportunities as like teachers with release time. So someone comes and subs for our class, so that tomorrow I'm going to go watch my colleagues, and we have a list of people who just drop in, and it's something you don't get to do unless that opportunity is created for you. And we're taking full advantage of it. I had a Spanish teacher in my room this morning during first period, and she got to see what my style is like, because there's only so much you can get when you're interacting during meetings. It's very different to actually watch somebody else teach and see how they interact with your kids. I might visit your class tomorrow, Hannah.
Oh my gosh, do it.
That's interesting. Let me ask you before we dive into the climate discussion and how you prepare your students. What would you say right now? We'll just start with you, Hannah, and then we'll go back to Liz. What would you say is the most? I know there's more than one. So challenges of teaching right now. Like, what do you think is the?
You're right. Yeah, there's a lot that's filling my brain at the moment. Well, I can speak, I guess, from my own perspective, and then what I'm seeing for other people as well, like in our community. As a newer teacher, new to this grade level and new to project-based learning, I think my challenges, the main ones that I am facing every day, just lie in like the curriculum and getting my brain around the flow of a project-based learning year. So something that's been helpful, and I know that other people don't always have this opportunity, but the previous teacher who had my position shared so many resources with me, and that's made things a lot easier. And then my teacher neighbor at my school has been amazing, and so has Liz. Like, I'm borrowing materials from her all the time. So that is my main like daily, I would guess, like obstacle. But something I guess I'm seeing just in the larger community is it's definitely burnout. I mean, there's teacher shortages, there's kind of feelings of apathy from not just the students, but it feels like a lot of people in education. Um, I just general feelings of like, what, how can we turn this around? Where do we even begin? Um, yeah, I don't know, general feelings of, I don't even know the word, but burnout, I guess, best describes.
Wow, that's something coming from a new teacher too, right? I mean, you're talking about observing in the community as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
And like at my previous site, um, I felt it way more strongly. I don't know if that's because it was my first year in, but I think it has something to do with the community as well. So feeling more support from admin and fellow staff members. And I know that that's a rarity to have at a school site.
thank you, Hannah. What are you thinking, Liz, about the challenges of teaching right now?
I want to echo what Hannah said about collaboration and sharing materials. Um, I also used a lot of materials from the person who was in her position before. Um, and I also share as freely as I can with people next door. Basically, just as many, like, if you're open to sharing what you have, it makes it easier to also ask for what you need. And that is a very much a normed thing at our site. Um, I saw there was a question about, we're sharing. There's two schools on one in one building. It's multiple buildings, but one campus shares two schools, and the students share classes for PE and for elective courses. Um, and then the core classes, which are taught based on kind of each individual school's philosophies, are separated out. So although Hannah and I are right across the hall from each other, we actually don't share students because she teaches students from her school and I teach students from my school for science. Um, and but they still come and visit each other's rooms. Like, I have her kids come over regularly to come see my fish tank and just hang out with me because they just know me as part of the school, and they're confused that we aren't in the same meeting together. Well, where's Miss Narnick
Oh my
Bryan?
gosh.
And I was like, well,
Every
we don't.
Wednesday, huh?
Yeah. I finally explained we have separate meetings. We don't meet the same time. But that kind of collaborative spirit has been really important in sustaining as many of us as possible through the challenges of the pandemic, which went beyond just, learning to use the technology for doing, online school. The group text that I have with some of my colleagues was critical in both urgent tech support. How do I make this happen? I don't understand what's going on right now. Versus, this is a really annoying thing. Can you help me fix it? And then also with the emotional support, like just daily check ins and just, here's what's going on with me. And you get support from your friends that way. And it's still a professional situation. It's not like it's important. I teach my student teachers when I'm mentoring how important it is to set up boundaries for yourself and work-life boundaries in order to make the career sustainable, because it will take everything you give for it. It does not set up boundaries itself. There's always more you can do. There's always stuff that could be better. You're pushing up against systems that exist that are not what's best for students. And so you're confronted with what tools and structures you have to work within versus what is best for the kids. So, and then because of what all the you know what students were going through with pandemic learning and the disruption to what would be considered like a normal school year for them or normal progression through junior high, which is such an important transition period for our students, seventh and eighth and ninth grade. They come in as elementary schoolers and leave as high schoolers. That is a huge and important path that we take them through. And there was so much that they missed out on because we were in distance learning. So a lot of the normal behaviors you would expect from students were not what we got last year, especially, was really hard. Some of that now is starting to settle down, and I'm experiencing this year for the first time since the pandemic kicked off what I would consider to be a normal year as far as student behaviors and relationships with students and what I can expect from them. and being able to build the relationships that is important for both of us. It's finally starting to feel there. So if, you know, a lot of teachers every year are making, or even partway through the year, are making the decision for themselves and for their family, is this sustainable for me? Is it worth what I'm sacrificing for my health, for my emotional well? There's just not a lot left to give outside of school when you're giving so much in school. It took me several weeks to recover from last school year because it was so emotionally difficult several weeks into the summer break before I was like finally ready to like do anything, before my bucket had filled back up enough for me to be myself again and then to come back ready this year. And I think if my student behaviors were as challenging this year as I experienced last year, I would probably be strongly considering leaving the field because it was that hard. So the burnout that Hannah was talking about is real. It's a caretaking position. It's required, you know, to grow. Like you don't have the next generation to do whatever it is you want to do with them. You don't have that without teachers, and you don't have that without nurses, and you don't have that with care, you know, nursing home caretakers. And these are all the positions that are that are caregiving, and so they are not seen as profitable as things when you're producing stuff or producing money. And so again, it's you're expected to do it for the love of it. It's a calling, it's a passion. So we can just keep putting more things on your plate. And I think, again, like Hannah was saying about supportive administration, we have incredibly supportive administration. I've been really lucky with the last like 3 principals I've had and the vice principals at my staff that I know I can say, here's what I need. And they don't ask questions. They just say, okay, do what you got to do. The kids will be fine. If they don't, you know, if learning doesn't happen today, but they're safe and you're fine, that's what matters. And I think that has also been really critical in maintaining our staff at our site and, you know, keeping us all here and working basically and continuing to work. And again, with my student teachers that I mentor, I point out to them, I say, look at this. This is how it should be. And this is not what you'll experience. Having staff who like to meet and eat lunch together and just talk as friends, that's not normal at a lot of school sites. And so I like bring my student teachers to the lunchroom. I say, watch this. This is what it could be and how it should be, but not how it will be at most places. So you should recognize it and appreciate it and work to build it wherever you end up after my time with you. Yeah.
Wow, that is a really amazing description of what it is like to be in the teaching field, and it's just from what I've read and having relatives in other parts of the country, it sounds like kind of a everywhere. You're not just describing a local issue, you're describing a national, if not international, the challenges. And when you talk about all the care poured in and that needs can never be met, I imagine that a lot of it, I mean, you have both academically, you're catching students up, and also with the ramifications of the mental health being, you know, pulled off developmental track. So I know that you guys are putting a lot of your like heart and soul into it. It's not just like let's make sure they have a strong science foundation, which I know really matters to both of you. Hannah, did you want to add anything else?
Sorry, I was just aggressively agreeing over here with my mic muted to that entire thing. Yeah, no, 100% agree all the way.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you both for that and for the details of that. That's really good for people who are listening who are not educators to know. So I wanted to ask, how do you prepare? How are you preparing students for not only having a solid knowledge base, but like with so much coming up around this climate change, climate disasters, which are unprecedented, I believe. and just, affecting everyone no matter where you live. What is it? I'll just start with that broad question. Um, just let you answer. How do you do it? Because they have to learn, like, critical thinking and, like, to become leaders and strategize their way out of disasters that older generations have created.
hmm So whenever I think about this, I think about when I was taught about climate change in school, which my high schooling was more than 10 years ago. And I feel like at that point, there were still arguments being made, or maybe it was just where I was, but people were still um, it felt like working really hard to convince the general population that climate change was real and that we would be seeing the effects very, very soon. So I feel my climate change education was centered on like, no nonsense. This is happening. I need you to understand it and you need to believe it. And it was almost like scaring you on purpose. It was like, look how real this is. You need to understand it. And that is so completely different from what I feel or see as like the general understanding of the population now. We are all very aware of it. Um, so what was past methods of educating people about climate change is very, very scary to children. It was scary to me then. It's very scary to them now, and they hear it all the time, so they're aware of it. Um, and I think it would be incorrect to say that we all don't have a little bit of eco anxiety. Um, so teaching it to students is tricky for me, but I feel like it centers a lot on letting them know that they have agency. I know people say that all the time, but reinforcing that they have agency even at their young age, which I feel was not something that was maybe communicated to people my age. It was like, yeah, when you grow up, you will have the ability to affect change. But I feel that now, people are like, you are a human and you have agency. Even as a 13, 14, 15-year old, you can change things. And there's, recent examples of that. I forget the exact case, but Liz, we might have talked about this. The students in Montana? No? I think it was a group of students in Montana that actually sued the state because they felt the state was being negligent to their future and putting profits of oil above their futures. And I believe they won, if I'm not mistaken. So it's really heartening to see these recent examples and being able to show it to students. Say, look what you can do. Like you have the capabilities. So not just teaching them, but showing them actionable ways to affect change.
Yeah, I just looked that up. They did win, according to the ACLU website. I'm not sure what the full outcome would be. So, and my approach on this is also pretty similar. Although I was in high school a little more than 10 years ago. So, climate change in my school was actually not a topic I was taught at all. I was not taught it at all. I was also taught not. I also was not taught natural selection and evolution in my biology experience, which is interesting because I got a 5 on the biology IP test and somehow managed to get through that without really understanding natural selection and evolution. And I've learned a lot more since then. But Hannah's predecessor in her position created a project for the curriculum that I currently use, which is the Ember Living Earth curriculum, that starts out by assuming that students know generally that the climate is a disaster, that bad things are happening, that people pollute, and there's all kinds of problems that humans are causing. But then it goes to the question of, well, why are humans doing this? It doesn't make sense that it's just we hate nature and we want to trash it and we want to pollute it and we don't want clean air and clean water and we want oceans full of plastic. That doesn't make sense. If you actually drill down into it, humans have human needs, that we need things, and there are reasons that we take the actions that we do. And so, there's a problem of medical waste produces a lot of plastic, but there's a reason that we use plastics in medicine, for sanitation, for transportation, for preservation, like all of those things. And so if we can't just say, well, stop doing it, because if we don't give an alternative way to meet the need, or even it, like a preference, for example, a lot of plastic packaging is, for food and for conveniences. But if we try to just say, well, everyone should just cook everything at home all the time, that neglects the problem of the fact that most women now work out of the house and they don't have the time to do all the cooking at home. That's a change. There's more women in the workforce, and it's not just everyone cooking at their homes. And so in order to feed yourself, sometimes a convenient packaging is what your option is. And also economic reasons, that might be what option you have that you can afford to feed yourself. And we can't just say stop doing that. So in order to address the problem, you have to understand why the problem exists and investigate why the problem exists, and then look at alternative ways of meeting those needs. So I send my students, I let them choose a particular human need that they find most intriguing or most compelling to investigate through the whole year. So as we learn about Earth's systems and biology topics, we then start investigating, okay, how is the human need impacting this system? So when we learned how the oceans and atmosphere formed during our Earth formation unit, we then ask the question, okay, how is the problem I'm investigating, how does it affect and interact with Earth's water? How does it interact with and affect with Earth's air? And, after looking at potential solutions, and they look at the solutions, you can't just say, okay, well, we figured out the solution. Then the next question is, if we have a solution, why is it still a problem? What are the barriers that exist? What needs to happen as far as legislation or technology developments or whatever it is for their particular human need? To figure out, what are the trade-offs to the solution? Why aren't we already doing it? Because if you can understand, like, that's how you understand a problem, is to really understand it from multiple aspects. And it can't just be, the climate's a disaster and the humans are trashing the planet. It's really, here's why they're doing it, here's why it's still happening, here's what we actually need to do to fix the problem, here's what we need to advocate for solutions. And and then again, with our systems, we also have to ask the questions of, like, okay, here's the solution I'm proposing, how does that interact with Earth's water and air, and what pollution does that, what trade-offs does that have? Because everything has effects and consequences. So really, that's my way of putting the agency into the students, is I am making them do the work. I am not telling them what the answers are. I don't know what the answers are. I want them to go figure it out. Use the internet machines that they all have every day for something other than computer games, which is what they want to do with the computers. Is like, okay, well, now we can actually ask the question, even looking at technology, there's a lot of e-waste that's produced. How do we reduce e-waste? How do we make it, what can we do? There's so many different avenues they can take. And when the student can really stick with that question through the whole year and really get a full picture of it, it's, I think, really, for this age group, think about what your life was like and what your brain was like right before you started, thinking about getting a driver's license. That's the age my kids are. They don't have driver's licenses yet, my ninth graders. So, the being able to start to really think about these big questions in bigger ways, and to understand the bigger systems that are involved, and understand it from a human problem, that it's not just that people suck, it's that they have needs that they're meeting in the ways that were provided to them. We have to acknowledge the fact that, corporations found a way to make money and are not being held responsible for the waste that they're producing. They're putting it on us to recycle things. It's it, we can't solve the problem without acknowledging it from multiple perspectives. And another thing that helps me keep hope is, I think, the way that Hank Green put it, is that all of the big problems are just collections of small problems, if you really get down to it. And people are all working on the small problems. So having them investigate the solutions that are already underway helps them see how we're working on those small problems to see improvements. And I'm at an age now where I also personally have seen you know, the increase in the amount of solar panels and how cheap those have gotten. And I did a project on solar panels when I was in high school, just learning about what they were and how they worked. And it's just so different now how widely available they are, just everywhere. Um, and that's something that was not true even 5 or 10 years ago. So um, that's kind of my perspective. I've lost the question already. I just got done to.
No, it was awesome. I actually, Hannah, before we talk about your approach, I want to ask Liz. So how are the students responding? Like, like I got really excited about thinking like how much you trust the students' intelligence. I mean, that's part of your approach is like you can figure this out. You can see that big problems are just a collection of little problems. You can pick a little problem, go. Here's the tools, here's information. And you must be seeing them come up with ideas that we haven't even thought of. I mean, are you seeing that? Are you seeing like, oh wow, that's brilliant. But anyway, how are they responding both emotionally and solution finding wise?
Kids are in very different places in ninth grade, and I like to offer problems, like opportunities that really allow students to take it as far as is appropriate for them. So for some kids, they may have some solution proposals that don't make a lot of sense and are not practical. But I can't be up to me to just tell them, okay, well, you came up with a solution, but you did a bad job. It's going to be up to them to kind of get deeper into that. And some of the students are ready for the bigger, deeper thinking and can really, or will have had experience of hearing about different things, you know, because their parents are ones who watch documentaries with them at home and they get, you know, chances to really dive deeper into the question with where they want to go with it. So I am not, my standard for them is not, you need to solve climate change before you leave my classroom. That's not the point. It's the practice of looking at these problems from multiple perspectives, and my class is not going to be the only time in their life when they get to do that. um, we kind of accumulate, though we get to a cumulative point where we can say like, okay, well now, as like a final, you know, you have this whole perspective of all of the life science that we've learned and the earth science that we've learned. What do you want to do? What do you want to tell other people to do? What if you're going to write a letter to the people who are deciding the laws, what would you tell them and how would you show them that your idea is the best one, and give them those opportunities to do that? And again, it's not up to me to tell them whether the solution is a good one or not. I can ask questions like, I don't understand what you mean when you say this. Seems like kind of magical thinking, like how does that already happen? But I can challenge, I can push them and say, okay, we've got a solution idea. It sounds like a good one. Why aren't we doing it yet? What can you find? How do you, you know, can you investigate? Because there are journalists who are looking at the barriers to this and the things that are happening in legislation that are stopping and halting things. So there's a question about if I have the students pick apart the ideas to figure out the issue of why or why not it would work. Yes, to an extent. I am still limited on time and the content that I, you know, am teaching through there. I allow them to work in groups and to talk about their ideas with each other. But that's an area of growth for me in my professional learning, of how to have students ask those questions more critically. Yeah, there's limitations on how much time we could really put into it. It's just a
Thank you
start.
so
Very, yeah.
What a great start. Thank you so much. Hannah, how do you prepare students?
Sure. Well, so something I learned from my mentor teacher in this particular area, he had students that were very involved with kind of like local issues that they were seeing. He made that a goal for his classrooms, which I thought was so great because sometimes in classrooms, when you talk about climate change and the effects of it, we focus on communities that are not our own, or those that are affected most by climate change we know are not those who contribute most to you know, emissions and climate change in general. So I thought that approach was great because they looked at, this was up in Oregon, so they looked at a lot of climate justice guided lessons. And he always started these topics with like kind of taking a feel of the temperature in the room, not literally, but like, what do we know? What have we heard? How are we feeling about this? And instead of being like, oh no, you don't need to be scared or we don't need to be anxious, we're going to fix it. You guys are going to fix it. Like, not invalidating their feelings and just kind of accepting where they were. And then bringing conversations like Liz was saying, like how your project is kind of a year-long thing. You're thinking about this periodically through the year. He did that as well. And that's a goal that I have as I'm still, in the growth process. But I just kind of want to take, my students where they are. I'd say like the general vibe, not to use that word too much, but the general vibe my students have is, it's fear, it's anxiety. Generally, it's just kind of apathy. Like they don't really know what direction to kind of go into with their action, I guess. And then I'll have a couple students who like seek me out to express their anxiety. Like, did you see this, Miss Z? Like, did you see that this is going to happen? I'm like, yeah, I did see that. Like, I understand why, you're feeling that way. And then I'll kind of think about that for a couple days and try and bring in like a good piece of news, like in the following weeks or something that are maybe tangentially related to that. But I don't know. It's something I think about all the time. Like, how can I make my approach to this better? How can I instill hope when pretty much all of the news that we consume is making that very difficult? So I'm constantly learning.
Yeah, it is. It's a challenge when we can feel hopeless, but when you're a teacher, you got to stand up and like hope and find ways to be really clear and firm and true that there is hope and turning that into action. So when it Hannah, can you think of any projects, because you're a project-based learning school, that are geared towards focusing on those? I'm just thinking this, clearly when I was in high school, there was no mention of this whatsoever. So from my perspective, it's like, wow, this is like, you know, teaching a science, like you got to keep, the foundational knowledge, and like things are constantly changing. Like over here, there's like mudslides and storms and desert and disaster and disaster and disaster. Do you have projects designed to draw out solutions? I guess that's the only way I can word it. To draw out, this is how we cope
Right.
with disasters.
Yeah. So there is a unit for the grade that I teach that is focused on human resources, or I'm sorry, Earth's resources that humans use. And we haven't gotten there yet. We've switched around our kind of sequence. But I know there are projects that my school has done, and I know Ember, the curriculum that Liz uses, has a lot of great projects. I don't know if they have any, I'm sure they do, focused on this, but anything you've done, Liz?
So the Ember curriculum, which stands for model-based reasoning in biology, has gone through a couple of revisions. So it used to just be biology, and then 3 years ago we integrated earth science into it. And originally the year-long project was focused on the students taking one species that's at risk of going extinct because its population is declining or its numbers are bad. And then every time we learned something about one of the topics in biology, we would investigate how does that affect this specific species, what's happening with their population, how does reproduction work for them, what foods do they eat, because these are all topics we talk about for humans. So then with the Living Earth curriculum incorporating earth science and earth systems, it's now the human impact year-long project. But there's one little piece of it I still use, which my students started on today, which is looking at how for the question of interest, the human impact problem the students are working on through the whole year, how does that affect one species? And why is it affecting them? And what solutions can we propose? So we can, because we're looking at how we get new species now. So it's one kind of big project, and it also, I also put in opportunities to discuss, how different people groups are affected by that. When you're investigating the problem, are all people on Earth affected by this the same? Are there some people that are affected more than others? Because, when we're talking about, some climate, that we know that it's not going to be distributed equally across the planet. And I offer that question to students because they're feel fearful for themselves in sort of an existential way of like the whole planet's messed up, and also it sucks for us here, but then trying to like narrow the focus a little bit, like, well, who is being harmed by this? And this year we our ninth graders started their social science courses, that required course is now the ethics studies course. So for the first time, I started getting responses on the original human impact problem about, well, we should be talking to Indigenous groups and their resources and their practices and their voices in this, and just, incorporating more people groups and perspectives on the problem, because there are many resources there that we would see if we were open to listening and open to the idea that the way we were taught was not fact-based, and is biased, because it's impossible to be unbiased. You are part of your culture, you grew up in your culture, you are affected by your culture, and if you pretend you aren't, then you're going to miss even more things. So that's again, I kind of got off track, but that was something else I wanted to bring
no,
in.
that's all relevant. And we have done a couple of shows with, or 3 or 4 at least, on around cultural practices, cultural learning, cultural fires, and it seems like there, I can't remember who it was, but the other day someone said to me, at least in this state, agencies are starting to pay attention to the Indigenous wisdom and voices, and the people who have the knowledge, who are willing to come out and say, okay, this is why we want these plants here, this is how we can bring water over here. And thank God there are people who have sustained the knowledge and are willing to keep teaching us, and that we're mainstream agencies are becoming more aware of how needed it is to listen and learn. And so
And yeah, I think it's important to bring in Indigenous voices to talk about something other than the tragedy that's been done to them. It's not just about the pain that they've experienced and what they're experiencing now as far as pain, but what resources and joy, and what we can learn all together, and how we can all grow and do better for the planet that we all share, that is limited. If we start taking on a different perspective of what it is not just a resource, it is an interacting system. You could think of it as being its own entity or alive, and still make good choices, based on taking on different perspectives that way too. And if we don't encourage and invite and center those voices, we aren't ever going to learn from them, or make any changes. Things will continue to be the way they are if we don't start changing the power structures of who's in charge. And it is hard to maintain hope when we have experienced and we hear all the bad things, and we've heard it for so many years. We have to remember that these kids are fresh. They don't know my jokes. They also don't know all the tragedies and the bad stuff, so I get to get some new opportunities for that every year. And although the kids have kind of a general idea, they haven't been inundated with the same specifics that we have. And so there's sort of an opportunity to get in before they've been completely shut down to the idea that they can affect change and they can be part of the change. And even if it's small, it's that starfish story. It mattered to that starfish. Like you maybe you didn't fix the problem, but you did make a difference. It was small. It still matters, because that's the only way any change gets done, is all the small problems are addressed.
thank you so much. Speaking of making a difference, let's turn to, we have about 5 or 6 minutes left, and I know you both have put in thought and live by some practices that help reduce carbon footprint. And also I'm thinking about, since it's holidays and gift giving in a lot of different cultures and backgrounds now, um, like for consuming cultures, how can we think about what we buy or consume or give and what we package it in? Everything from like what food we're buying, what food we're eating. Anyway, so I just wanted let's just go back to Hannah first. Have you thought of any practical suggestions for how we approach reducing our carbon footprint, like especially now when some of us might be consuming more than usual?
Yeah. So something that I think about all the time is I forget who the creator was, but she I think it's called Going Zero Waste on Instagram. But she was like, the best thing you can do is buy nothing. Don't buy anything. For previous years, I've gifted some people like experiences or maybe given like a gift card. Um, Instead of being like, I bought this thing for you, and now you are tasked with deciding whether or not you like this physical thing, or you can return it and get another physical thing. I know that's not always realistic. Um, and I know this is such a minor thing, but I like wrapping my gifts in newspaper instead of buying
Mhm.
wrapping paper and then just wrapping it in twine. I think it looks charming. Um, and let's see what else. Yeah, I just always go back to not buying anything, like reuse, reuse, reuse. If you have something, repair it. Um, it's so difficult for gift giving, and I'm always trying to think of things that are not excessive. But I was talking to Liz, speak of this, the
Yeah.
other day, yesterday maybe?
So one
Mhm.
place that I'm trying to make this change is this maybe getting a little personal, but in the conversations I have with my family and challenging what has been normed in our family and how we express love and how we express like my parents grew up with especially my father with a certain idea around gift giving and what it means, and I'm challenging that. I'm saying, my husband's really encouraged me on this. He's kind of uncomfortable with the idea of giving a gift because the calendar says it's a certain day instead of, oh, I saw this and I thought of you, and it didn't matter what day it was. And so, I'm telling my parents, we're really there for the company. We're not there for the gifts. Don't bias that. And so you can make those changes not just in your own actions, but how you speak to the people in your life that you love who will listen to you because they also love you.
That's a great point. And I both of those, and I do love giving, like donating in the name of someone, or like, is it called? I should know the name. The World's Kitchen, the amazing group that goes into, they're in Palestine and Israel right now, trying to feed people who are starving in extremely dangerous situations. Like, if I all of my family would appreciate it if I donated to that in their name. Um, so another kind of non-material way of giving. And also, just want to, I think, I don't know if both of you are vegans or one of you is vegan, but I'm not myself. But I've learned just glimpses of what a huge difference it makes if you're not buying meat, even if it's just reducing it, like not with like guilt tripping, but like even the reduction of how much we buy. I don't know if Liz, you want to say something before we wrap up?
Yeah, the earth can't sustain the amount of meat that a standard American eats. If we eat more plant-based, it makes a huge difference. And it's something that you can't, if it's within your means and it works for you and your body, it is something you should strongly consider.
Thank you for that. And I think we have about you have a 10-second message, Hannah, for a closing, or
Oh, happy holidays, everybody. Thank you for having me, Video.
Thank you. Yeah,
thank
I
you.
really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. And I also want to thank our listeners and viewers for tuning in, and for our sound engineer, Rebel, and our producer, Dean Piper. And I hope you all come back next Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time to Talk 4 TV or W4CY.com. And may we all have enriching conversations in diversity this week. Thank you again.
Inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech of the heart.